What is up, guys? Professional weeaboo Ego Leo here, with a video about something that's been bugging me for a minute now. RPGs are pretty popular with the youngsters nowadays. Those fuck-ass kids who probably think Superman 64 isn't the best game of all time. But today we're going to talk more about the niche side of RPGs. JRPGs.
A Japanese man love titties.
Now, I know what you're thinking. But Isaiah, everybody and their grandpappy knows about Persona, and Fire Emblem, and Final Fan! Which is true, but there's two very underrated game series that keep getting plenty of spin-off games and even animes, but no one seems to talk about for some reason. I'm talking about the Disgaea and Neptunia series. First, let's compare these games to something like Fire Emblem. In Fire Emblem, you have extremely likable characters, and a game mechanic that, you know, once they're dead, that's it, they're out of the story completely. So it can be really emotional to lose a character. Unless you just restart a fight as soon as someone dies, defeating the purpose of the whole unique mechanic. On January 30th of 2003, the first Disgaea game came out for the PlayStation 2. With characters that broke the fourth wall and had very colorful character traits and quirks.
Laharl, why are you screaming?
I don't know why, but for some apparent reason I can't stand women with sexy bodies. On a side note, flat-chested girls like you have absolutely no effect on me.
Well, excuse us for being flat.
But I was robbed of something even more important. My screen time in this game!
Why do you want to defeat the Overlord? Isn't he actually your father?
That man, my father, trampled and crushed my precious game system and all of my games!
Huh? What's the big deal about that?
What's the big deal?
But it also had a deep story that hit you right in the feels. You got to love these characters with more of the comic relief moments, with a little bit of, serious tone sprinkled out here and there. That way, when something tragic happens, it's all the more devastating, because it's happening to a character you legitimately love.
I've had enough of this. It's not like this will bring her back.
Besides, if that love freak was here, she would have stopped me anyway. I never knew I could shed tears.
You want to exchange your life for hers? Is that even possible?
Who knows? But this is the least I can do for her now.
You could also create various classes and name them whatever you want. You can name them after your friends, characters, really anything you want. So it's very creative in that regard. They kept building on this until 2015, when Disgaea 5 came out for the PlayStation 4. Every Disgaea game built or adds some kind of new mechanic every time they made a new game, which kept it fresh and interesting to play. And each Disgaea game has hundreds of hours worth of gameplay in the form of New Game Plus and, post-game content. And on the surface level, you could compare this war-style fighting mechanic to something like Fire Emblem. But it's much more unique than that. You can actually choose your special moves and what you're going to do instead of it happening at random. And there are colored panels on the floor sometimes that have a special condition like enemy boost. Or HP and SP are switched. Or reverse damage, where if you want to hurt an enemy, you'd heal them instead. Some of these levels late game get very complicated, to the point where you could spend 15 or 20 minutes on one match. The Disgaea series has sold 3 million copies as of May 2017. So what gives? Why does nobody talk about this game and it's not as mainstream as something like Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy? From what I can tell, it's because the game was mainly marketed in Japan and still is mostly marketed in Japan. But then why do they have badass voice actors do the American versions? And don't get me wrong, a good amount of people do buy these games in the US of A, but games like Final Fantasy get so much more praise, while many JRPG fans pass up Disgaea. A lot of Disgaea games are on Switch now, and are also on their home console, the PlayStation. I recommend anybody who's into RPGs at all check this game out, or even if you're into good storytelling. Then on August 19th, 2010, a game called Hyperdimension Neptunia came out. It had your standard RPG plot and protagonist, with the main character losing their memories, but much like Disgaea, they owned up to this. But if you take Disgaea's fourth wall breaking next to Neptunia's, it's very different. Neptunia's whole thing is based around breaking the fourth wall, which on paper sounds like it would get annoying after a while, or would take the seriousness away from some moments, but it takes itself just seriously enough to make it work. As where Disgaea has great story with amazing characters, Neptunia focuses more on the characters than the story.
The game also had plenty of research material.
The character interactions are really what's interesting about this game. The story of these games is usually your standard save the world or save our friends story. But the characters are so much fun, you should always find yourself rooting for them anyways, even if the story isn't that gripping. The Hyperdimension Neptunia series has sold over 1 million units worldwide. It's gained even more praise because of a certain YouTube goofball.
What's cracking, guys? Welcome to another...
I don't know if it's just me, but games like Final Fantasy and Fire Emblem have deep and complex characters, and have a few comic relief moments. However, I think the games themselves take themselves a little too seriously, mainly in Final Fantasy's case. Sometimes it can come off as overly angsty or edgy. Fire Emblem does do a very good job of balancing comedy with seriousness. It really has you getting emotionally invested in these characters. But as far as how much it compares to Neptunia and Disgaea, I'd say it'd be like comparing Marvel and DC. They both have extremely deep and complex characters. They have different ways of approaching them. A difference in tone. A darker overall story, while still having the heroes triumphant in the end, versus the same end result, but with a much lighthearted tone. Neither of these is necessarily wrong or right, but there's different audiences for both, which is why it's so jarring to me that one gets so much more attention than the other. In my opinion, being able to keep things fun and over the top while still having an emotionally gripping story is something much harder to pull off, and that's what Nep and Disgaea do perfectly. So long story short, Persona 5 is still a boneless masterpiece.